This is the podcast, Cristo Rey. Tomorrow's Halloween, yeah, it's time for trick or treat. This is the podcast, Cristo Rey. But you know what's even scarier? This Tuesday is election day.
Hey guys, welcome back to the 2020 podcast. Today I'm your host Nehemiah, and we are welcomed by Brianna.
Hey y'all.
Rebecca.
Hey guys.
Martai.
Hey.
And last but not least, Daviana.
Hi.
Wow, I can't believe Mr. Corrigan is right. Can you believe it's election day on Tuesday? That is scary. It's also the deadline, the U.S. Census, which I'm sure a lot of people are confused about.
Well, we have a very special show today. What you're about to hear was recorded in front of a live audience on Wednesday, October 7th. Maybe you were there. Here's Miss Saliba introducing the night.
Good evening, everybody. I am Sarah Saliba. I'm the campus minister at Cristo Rey, and I want to welcome you to our voting and census information session. We're so excited to bring this to the wider Cristo Rey community, students, staff, parents, family, friends, whoever's wandered in tonight because they got word of it. We welcome you. There are these two incredibly important events happening in our country at the same time, right? The census and the 2020 election. And we know that we absolutely cannot afford for anybody to be left out of either one of these. So these various entities at Cristo Rey came together: campus ministry, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, parents and families together, student council, and all on the heels of Hispanic Heritage Month, in the hopes that we could educate and inform and clarify whatever was necessary so that everybody in our community could participate and everyone be heard. This is also being recorded to be turned into an episode of the Cristo Rey podcast, which is going to air on October 30th. We're pleased to introduce two experts, guests for tonight. We have Regina Loaiza, who is a freshman at the Ohio State University, pursuing degrees in environmental policy and international relations with a pre-law track. She's also an advocate for climate and social justice and volunteers for the Re-Earth Initiative, an international youth-led organization dedicated to making climate action accessible to all, as well as works to get out the vote among the underrepresented communities. She's also a contributing writer for It's magazine and currently works as an enumerator for the U.S. Census Bureau. She's also, I don't think she would mind my saying, she's a graduate of Cristo Rey Columbus High School. Gabriela Loaiza, a 17-year payments industry expert, general manager at the emerging payments team for digital payments in Discover Global Network. In this capacity, Gabriela is helping partners find business development opportunities to add payments to their existing products or services. Gabriela is a certified smart card industry professional and has participated on several industry panels. Gabriela holds a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from Ricardo Palma University in Lima, Peru, and an MBA from Franklin University in Columbus. In her spare time, Gabriela serves as vice president for the board at Columbus Bilingual Academy, as a board member at Proyecto Mariposas, and a member of the Cristo Rey PTA. We welcome you both very, very warmly. Thank you so much for being with us. I believe we are starting with some general information for tonight, and then at some point we will open up to questions. Some were submitted ahead of time, but we'll also be able to take questions live in the chat in English or Spanish. So, without further ado, our guests, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Special guests that are my mom and my sister. And thank you for all the student body that sent in questions for this special event. And I guess I'll start with the first question. So for the people who are not allowed to vote yet, why should they be interested about the census and the voting?
Okay, well, thank you for the question. And again, we're here to kind of provide some general education about the census and why we should be voting. You're right, you may be wondering, you're not 18 yet, why you should care about these. There is so much at stake right now with our nation. And there are so many ways that you can help, as I don't know if you were aware, but you can help somebody that doesn't understand English very well and translate for them. There's no age limit on who can go as a translator with somebody. Voting takes place on a Tuesday. People work that day. So you could be helping somebody, babysit their children so they can go vote. You could, help somebody with disabilities to get to the voting place. So there's so many ways that you can get involved without necessarily, being you the one voting, but you can support those that can vote so they can go. Also, if you think about it, sometimes the ballot is a little bit confusing. You have to follow the instructions, especially for those that are voting via mail. It could be confusing. There's a double envelope that you need to use, and you could basically, have issues if you don't follow the instructions. So, helping somebody understand the instruction on how to vote via mail is something else that you can do to support, this important event in our nation.
Yeah, and I also want to add that if you are 17 and a senior in high school, you can actually will get paid to be a poll worker on election day. And so there's actually a national shortage of poll workers. So if you are able to show up on Tuesday, we would greatly appreciate it, especially since the people who have done it in the past are people who are typically older and at higher risk for COVID. So if you're able to and can do it safely, we highly encourage you to go and be a poll worker if you can.
Well, I just kind of want to second that what Rebecca just said, because literally last week I saw something on Instagram about 17-year-olds being able to work the polls, and I signed up. So hopefully I get an email back. But kind of just want to open the question to both of you guys. So with a lot of the COVID happening and a lot of states being not sure how safe going to physical polls can be, can you kind of speak on some of the other ways that people can vote now that are kind of more either accessible or safe because of the risk of COVID?
Well, early voting opened today, so for those that want to kind of avoid the crowds, this is perfect timing if you want to go in person. Obviously, everybody is required to wear a mask. So if that's something that you want to do, you can, wear a mask and go for early voting.
And you actually go to the Franklin County Board of Elections on Morris Road to do that, so it wouldn't be your typical polling location. And you can go on the Franklin County Board of Elections website to see what the hours are, because it varies based on day and the week you go. But then there's also the option to request your absentee ballot, so that way you don't even have to leave your house except for mailing it in. And the deadline to request your absentee ballot is, I believe, 3 days before. So October 31st would be the deadline to request your absentee ballot. So don't hesitate to do that. Get on that right away. And then you have to turn that in before election day, the day before election day.
Yeah, you can either put it on the mail, or you could also drop it at the same location, the Board of Elections in Morse Road. So either, you want to be safe and just take it in person, you can do that, or you can just mail it. And there is an option where you can get tracking. So I have registered, I have done absentee ballot before, and you get an email, once they get your ballot, and then you also get a confirmation when your ballot was casted. So that's a good way to make sure that you made it in, your vote was counted.
Oh yeah, and sorry, I said it was the day before, but it's actually, you can turn it in no later than 7:30 on election day. So you still have some wiggle room with that.
That's really good information to know. Thank you for clearing that up, because I know there's a lot of people who want to get involved in voting, but don't necessarily know how, because maybe they're the first generation kids to get voted, or maybe they don't know where to go and all of that. So it's good that we know this now.
Greetings, Cougars. Mr. Rose here, reminding you all that October is National Bully Prevention Month. Here at Cristo Rey, we want to create a bully-free zone, but we need all of you to be active participants in ensuring everyone feels safe and welcome.
Hello, fellow ninth graders. My name is Najmi Tal. Please complete my bullying survey that was sent out on Monday by Mr. Rose, because it can provide results and statistics of bullying. Thank you.
I just wanted to make the definition of census very clear for anybody who maybe did not hear about it in the beginning. Could you give us a really good general definition of what census is, so we don't have any misinterpretation?
Basically, the census is a national counting of all the people in order to reallocate funds based on what they see, how many people is in each state or county or city. And so it's basically about power and money. And so once they count everybody, they'll see how many representatives does this state deserve based on how much people they have. And then in terms of money, also reallocating funds. So they see, oh, there's this many kids in this area, so we're going to give them that much money for education or for transportation. So it really is, and it's not just at the national level, but also at the county level, the city level, all the levels will be looking at these numbers in order to see how they're going to reallocate funds. And so it's really important that everyone gets counted so that we get our fair share of the budget.
And it's also very important that you ID yourself correctly. Like when you are completing the census, that you disclose yourself, like if you are Latino, if you are, African American, if you are Asian or any other race and nationality, and any needs in terms of, do you need translators and things like that? Because also the census is going to tell, the government, like if you need to have special services in a special area, if you need, for example, to have, translators available for health services and things like that, or at school, or ESL, English as a second language services, those will be also determined by the number of people that claim themselves as being, born in a different state or speak a different language, or be born, like have a different racial or, ethnicity.
And it's not just governments that are going to be looking at this, but also other companies as well. So they'll see, oh, wow, there's a lot of people who are eligible to work in this area. So maybe we'll go ahead and settle our our big corporation in this country, in this city. And since there's a lot of people who would be able to work. And so they're looking at these numbers as well.
Yeah, a recent example was just Amazon. When they were looking at their headquarters, they look at this kind of data to see, are they going to have enough flow of workers for the next years? And that's one of the, the factors that base their decision on where to put their headquarters.
It's good that you cleared that up, because I know there's a lot of people who know about voting, but they don't know the specific details and everything that's necessary to be able to vote, especially if you're not really like fluent in English, which is the primary language whenever you want to go vote. And you need to be able to have those resources when going to voting areas. So thank you for clearing that.
I have one of the questions said, since voting is by mail this year, how long will it take to get results back from it?
Well, I'm not sure how long exactly it takes, but just to give you an idea, like my mom and I requested it like a few weeks ago, and then we received it yesterday. But I imagine it's a lot quicker now that the actual elections are open, with the deadline to register being closed. And so I'm sure that if you request it now, it shouldn't take too long in order to get it back.
Typically mail takes 3 days. So, and then casting your ballot typically takes, 1 to 2 days. Mm-hmm. So I would expect like a 5 days, sort of in average. It all depends on what time you left the envelope in the mail, and, when exactly was picked up by the mail, mailman, etc. But, I would say probably between 5 and 7 business days.
Yeah, and since we don't know an exact answer, I would just suggest the sooner the better for everything.
Just to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Is it dangerous to go vote due to COVID-19?
We're not really experts on COVID. Mm-hmm. I would just say just follow the general guidance that has been provided. There are people that are at more risk than others, so mm-hmm. just follow the same guidelines as anything else. Everybody's wearing masks if you feel comfortable. If you're not a person that is at high risk for COVID, I think you could go and just cast your ballot in person. All the rules apply, so you have to keep the 6 feet distancing, social distancing, wear your mask, don't take it out. If you need to eat or drink something, do it quickly so you can put your mask back. Same directions as with everything else related to COVID.
Yeah, but in order to keep everyone safe, the best way is just to, if you can, to request your absentee ballot to avoid any risks.
Well, I kind of have a follow-up question, what you guys were speaking about earlier. So one of the things, as a lot of minorities, whether it's African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Pacific, a lot of people get kind of like weary or shy about identifying there. But can you guys kind of talk about the importance specifically for minorities, about how much it goes into, like, if you complete the census, how like the reallocation of money will help our community?
Yes, very well. So just to, first of all, some minorities are afraid of disclosing, where they're from, or, where they were born and things like that, because they believe that the information is going to be shared with somebody else. And there could be some concerns with immigration and other agencies, depending on your situation. So first of all, let's clarify that the census workers are not allowed to disclose any of that information. It is prohibited by law. So you should not be concerned about that. The information that you are disclosing on the census is private, and again, it is prohibited that can be shared with any other government agencies or any other institutions. And so, important thing to clarify, right? So don't be afraid of being specific about your ethnicity, your race, and all of that. Regina, is there anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, and so it's really important that you do answer these questions about like race and ethnicity, because those funds they're going to be tracking that in order to fund things like civil rights institutions. Sometimes kids don't get counted, and so we're talking about thousands of dollars per kid when they're going to education. So if you want your kids to have a better education, make sure they're counted. And there's so many other institutions that are going into this. So really, it's just everything that government and money have to do with.
And making sure that everybody's counted, because, we know that, especially right now with COVID and the crisis, some people had to move with other people. And so they may be concerned, or there is, 10 of us living in a house where only 5 should be living. Is anybody, going to come over and, children's services or something, say, hey, there's too many people living in this house, so we're not counting everybody. Again, it's prohibited for the census to share information about that. So it's very important that we disclose every single person, including babies, on the census, so everybody's counted, because again, this data is going to serve for the next 10 years. So the baby that is right now maybe 2 months old is going to go to school in 5 years, and we want to make sure that that baby has a place in the school system, that was counted.
And also it'll provide funding for healthcare, care for the elderly, funding for emergency services like natural disasters, such as like the fires that are going on right now in California, or for the opioid crisis, which is something that's prevalent here in Ohio, or like if there's a stimulus check later on, that'll be based on the census as well. So it's really important that everyone gets counted so we get our fair share of the budget.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I know my parents kind of had the idea that if you give the government your information, they have everything. So they're always like, be careful with what you put on documents, do this, make sure it's correct. Even with FAFSA, they're telling us you can't do any wrong steps. You have to make sure that you have a teacher with you to get there. So I totally agree with that idea, and I feel like more people should do that.
This is Mr. Lofficer LaHance with your Theology Minute for All Saints Day. All Saints Day is celebrated on November the 1st, and it's a time to think about the men and women who have come before us, who have died and are with God in heaven. Their lives are examples for how to live and how to live the faith in many different eras of the church, whether it was in the first few centuries or even in the last few years.
And if you look today, continuing to my next question, the media tends to emphasize voting a lot. And they're always trying to tell people go out and vote. You see celebrities like Marsai Martin, Sabrina Carpenter, all of them promoting voting. How do you think that the outcry from the media has actually helped with voting? And do you think there's anything that we could do as students with our social media to make sure people go out there and vote, or even if they're not vote, participate in somehow?
So that's a great question, Brianna. And let me just tell you a little bit about, my story here, because I was born in Peru and came to the U.S. 17 years ago with Regina as a baby. And it was very interesting to me, very little people was actually going to cast their vote. And that was amazing to me because, in Peru, everybody goes to voting. Sometimes we take democracy, for granted. We don't realize all the people that had to fight to make this possible, beginning with the colonizer, with the colonies and all the people that got us free from, the Great Britain and all of that, all the women that had to fight to get for the women's right. That just happened 100 years ago. Only 100 years ago, 60 years ago was when finally all the restrictions were lifted for African Americans to be able to vote. So that's not a long time ago. We forgot that, all this history. Our ancestors are actually looking for us to take advantage of this. In Peru, we lost our democracy in 1968 to a military government, and we couldn't recover it until 1980. Again, so we take democracy for granted, but not every country is able to freely go and vote. So I do have, very close memories of 1980 when finally everybody was able to vote and we have our first president after a long and dark military government. And so when I came to the US and saw that very little people pay attention to voting date and it's just a weekday and some people go and some don't, I felt like, we have to change that. We need to really realize that that's not what our ancestors were looking for us to do. They were actually looking for us to go and exercise our right. What is the difference? If only those that are related to government, only those that have a personal interest go to vote, what is the difference, from that to the colonies that we were living in, like, 100 years, a few hundred years ago? So think that, the idea was for every single one of us to be able to exercise our right to vote, to choose our, officers, and to hold them accountable, to fight for us and for what is right. So very important to remember. Let's don't forget our past and what it cost to take us to this point.
Yeah, especially for our generation, it really is just about what do you want the next 60 years to be? What do you want the rest of your story to be? In 2020, we didn't show up to vote, and then the climate crisis continued. Our economy continued to go bad. People didn't address racial injustices, and it was just really bad. Or in 2020, we showed up and we did some work. We made sure that candidates who represented our values were elected. We addressed climate justice, we erased racial justice, and we got things better. So which side do you prefer? And I think social media is making that really happen because, us Gen Zers are always on our phones. And if us Gen Z and all the other generations, if we show up, I think we can really make good things happen this election. So keep it up.
I think it was funny that you were just talking about like the ability of the elections that don't necessarily occur, that just aren't the presidential elections. So it kind of like adds to one of my follow-through questions, and to talk about how a lot of the times we get caught up between voting and census to think about the real allocation of money. But can we also kind of hint at or just talk about how it redistributes the House district, like the housing districts, and like how, and how like the House of Representatives is based upon how many people per state they get. So can we kind of like just dive into a little bit like, hey, when your state has more people sign up for the census, they get more power in government. And for example, Rebecca, you were just talking about how we had a midterm election, we were able to get more to say, and the things that we as younger generations, as kind of like that gap between what a lot of our politicians have of age and what our age is.
So yeah, you're totally correct. So the census tell us that the reallocation of the number of representatives that we're going to have and the division that is going to take place at the government level. I don't have exactly the details, exactly how many people do we need to have in order to get one more seat, or how many people, if we miss this many people, we're going to miss, that many seats. I don't have that number handy, but we can definitely find out and share that with you afterwards. But there is a possibility, right? If we don't show up, that we could miss some seats, or if, we all go, then we can gain some seats. So that is definitely, at stake.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, even what you said before, it's such a beautiful way, if you put it, you have to show up and like remember your past in order to be able to vote and do all the things that you want to see in the future for your own world. Like, I forgot who said it. I think it was Valerie. I think it was Miss Valerie Jarrett. I think that's her last name. She was talking about, if you want to vote, or if you want to see what's going on in the future, if you want to see the things that you want to see in the future, you have to show up, and you either have to be there to vote, be there to represent, and make sure that the things you want to happen happens, or, just make sure that other people, you're advocating for other people to also show up and do the same thing. So I totally agree with that. And the representatives, if you're in AP government or even history, you get to learn about how representatives are so important because they're the people who are connected to the government and they will allocate for the things that we want. So like keeping that in mind, I know, Regina, you were talking about climate change. Can you talk about how voting can really affect how things change within big topics like climate change and all race and injustices?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have seen like that image circulating around social media, like that big clock that they installed. I think it was in New York, like that countdown, like, oh, we only have this many years left. And so, you know, presidents, the term is 4 years. And if we only have, I think it was 7 years left, that this next president is really going to impact what happens in the next 4 years. Do we turn things around and address the issues, or are we just going to continue spiraling back into more and more issues? And so with issues that are as pressing as this, like our lives are at stake, it's really important that we elect officials that believe in climate change, for one, and are going to actually do something to address it. And with other issues like racial justice, we need, like, people are dying. And so we really need people who are going to actually believe that racial issues are a problem and that we need to do something about it in order to have more equality. So that's why it's so pressing that we elect candidates who believe this.
And we also need diversity, right? Because if we, you know, it's hard, it's really hard. You have to have some special training, you know, to be able to understand the perspective of everybody and to be able to care for the needs of everybody. And unfortunately, some of that training has not happened in the past. Some people didn't care or didn't see the need for that. And so it's important to have representation at every level from everybody, so that together, you know, we can bring the perspectives and be able to share the needs for all the different, you know, ethnicities that we have here, for all the different communities, etc. So again, you know, it's important that we see variety and the officials that we elect. And some news here, we just got our absentee ballot on the mail right now. So yay, we're ready.
I always feel like someone is watching me. Tom, is that you? Hey Cougars, while we're on the topic of Halloween and music, the choir class has been working hard during the different time to make a ghostly Halloween mashup for the students. Be on the lookout to hear about the Ghost of Tom and all our Halloween tunes.
I guess the follow-up, you were just talking about diversity in different ethnicities, is if you can kind of speak about what it was like during your entire process of being able to vote. Because as someone who immigrated here, you know, you may not automatically have known what the process was like. So for a lot of our students here, they may have parents or family members or them themselves, but don't necessarily know how to take that next step as someone who immigrated here to get the proper license or just the proper ability to vote.
Yeah, and so that's definitely something that is different here in the U.S. than is in my country, because, you know, when you, in Peru, when you turn 18, you automatically get your car to go vote. Again, because I don't know, I guess Peru is very popular to go to vote. And so everybody gets one. Here in the US, you have to register, which is kind of different. So I am so grateful. And again, keep that in mind, you know, there are so many things that you can do as a volunteer to educate people. So I am so grateful for that one volunteer that was standing outside the court when we, you know, were completing our citizenship jury and, you know, receiving that. So there was a ceremony. So we were doing that, and there were these couple volunteers outside waiting for us and telling us, hey, now that you are a citizen, you can register for, you know, for voting. I'm like, really? I didn't know I had to register. And so I did my registration right away. And, you know, and I think that was 2008. And so I think I participated on the first local election in 2009 and then in 2010. So, you know, that is something that many people may not be aware, that you have to register. And again, you know, you have to fill forms. You can do it on, you know, online and things like that. It's quite simple. But if you're not aware, you may not do it on time, you know, and you miss your opportunity to participate in the first, you know, voting session that happens after you become a citizen. And Regina, you want to talk about your experience?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty easy to register to vote. And with COVID and everything, well, you can go to the DMV and register to vote when you get, like, the whole, when you get your license and all that. But you can also just go on the Secretary of State's website, and it takes like less than 5 minutes. And also the Secretary of State's website also has like when all the deadlines are, when all the election times are. So I would highly encourage you to check everything they have on there in order to make sure you don't miss any deadlines and to see how you can register as well.
That's very good information to receive. I know as times like kind of went on, things kind of changed. Like, you know how they used to teach cursive in school, and nowadays they don't teach cursive in school. They kind of got rid of it. Same way when I was younger, they used to take us to libraries and we would do research on certain people who wanted to run to become a certain position. And now they don't do that anymore. How would you say we could get information on these people that we want to, you know, vote for? What ways, what research can we do to find out about these candidates and make sure that they're only in for the best when trying to serve us?
Yeah, so there's quite a few different websites that will have like a sample ballot of your county, your state, and you can see like who is all going to be on the ballot. Like the League of Women's Voters has one. I think vote.org might have one. There's quite a few, maybe even the Franklin County, and so that way you can search them up. But you could also just look up who's running for county commissioner, who's running for the common pleas, and then also Ballotpedia. Ballotpedia also has a few sorts, and they'll have like a quick rundown of each candidate, and then they'll also have like the personal website of each candidate, so then you can look up what their main issues are, what's their experience, and all of that information. So I would check out those websites as well.
Yeah, and also, well, right now, a little bit unfortunate that because of COVID has, many events were, stopped. But in the past, I have attended also like meetings where the candidates are coming and giving their, their ideas and sharing with people what they're planning on doing. So I have joined a few of those in the past just to educate myself, because as you said, what good can you do if you just go and, check X, like a test, I'm just going to check, X on A and every 8 and see what I get. That's not the point, right? The point is that you actually know exactly what you're doing. And then you, have research and think about the candidates, but also the issues that are being added into the ballot, and you understand what's happening. And again, guys, there's another volunteering opportunity for you to explain the issues to people. Because some people don't understand what the issues are, and they may be, signing yes or no without really understanding what the yes or no means. And unfortunately, there is so much sometimes conflicting information that, certain people with certain interests want you to say yes or no to certain issues. So you really have to be careful with what you get on the mail and do your own research so that you can, have a better understanding.
Yeah, which is also another great reason to request an absentee ballot, because that way you don't have to like decide in the moment. You can read about it, think about it for a couple of days before you actually decide. Rather, when you're like actually in the place, you kind of have to make a decision that same day. So also another great reason to request your absentee ballot.
And again, voting is a right, but it's also a responsibility. And with that responsibility comes doing your research. So in our case, we have a dual citizenship. So we are citizens of Peru and citizens of US. And so we also get to vote for Peru, and we don't live there. And so, but our vote can help or influence, what's happening in the country, and we can help our families and relatives resolve some issues. So we have to do more research even in Peru just to make sure that, the candidates and situations that we're being faced with the ballot, that we feel comfortable on knowing who to, what to do, who to vote for, and all of that. So again, it takes some time to prepare, it takes some time to research. Sometimes some people don't have that time. So sometimes it helps, when I have to vote for Peru, I tell my sister, anything that you learn or any researches that you do, please share them with me so that I can, be better educated on what I need to do when I get to the voting poll.
Yeah, and going back to the power of social media, like don't be afraid to look up the candidates on Instagram or Twitter and see what they're talking about or what events, because most of the time they'll post like, hey, I'm having this session on Tuesday if you guys want to join via Zoom or whatever. So look them up, see what, maybe we can join an event they're having or join their newsletter and see what kinds of things they're posting. So that's another plug too.
And do a summary for your parents, because parents were busy. We, life got more complicated with COVID. So you guys can help your parents, research candidates and, issues and things like that. do a summer together. It's such a good educational experience. You have no idea how much you're influencing the youngest on your family, because your 5-year-old brother, your 6-year-old sister is looking up to you. What are you doing for your parents? And you're gonna have to do the same when your parents become like 60 or 70, and how do you look it up in here? And so you're gonna have to help them do that research. So you are basically being a model to the future generations when you're helping your parents research candidates and issues.
Yeah, and going off of that, don't be afraid to have like those difficult conversations with your parents, because I know especially like Latino parents, like what they'll get their information off Telemundo, Televisión, and a lot of those times those news anchors are really biased. And so ask them like, what did you see, or what do you think about this subject? And don't be afraid to educate them about it, since you probably have more access to unbiased sources than they do. So don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations with them.
And I know politics could be touchy for some people, especially, could sometimes cause division. But again, you have a responsibility to your future and what's going to happen with the country in the next few years. So if you have to convince your parents that, this is the right thing to do, come on, this is a great practice for you. One day you're gonna become the CEO of a company, and you're gonna have to convince everybody on that group about something that needs to happen. So get your practice early on.
Hello everybody, it's your podcast host Ruby. I'm here to give you a little bit more of insights about our beloved tradition, the Day of the Dead. This day is known to be celebrated particularly in Hispanic countries. It occurs every year on November the 2nd, and it's a way to honor family members and ancestors in which have passed on to the next life. It's commonly believed that this day our deceased family members descend to earth and visit us. We honor them and celebrate the life they once had by putting up altars with pictures of them and their favorite foods. We also go to church and pray that they're at peace wherever they may be at. For many, this one day out of the year is a very important spiritual celebration, because for them, it's the only time that they can truly feel the energy of their ancestors. A very popular food that is eaten this day is called el pan de muerto, the bread of the dead. The Hispanic culture welcomes anyone who may want to celebrate this day. Unity is nourishment for the heart, so let's be respectful and acknowledge the diverse traditions many of us have.
The value of elections, not the presidential one, but the importance of like the federal and local positions. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, so I think most of the people don't realize how important these like smaller elections are with like city and state. And honestly, like your city and state officials affect you a lot more than the decisions being made at the federal level, because these are the things happening in your neighborhood, in your city. And well, going back to my experience at Cristo Rey, like I really realized that working at the mayor's office or the governor's office, like all the different things they had to work on every day. And you think that this is like some higher being or the federal government working with them, but it's really your mayor or your county commissioners. And so you really want to, if you want things to happen in your neighborhood, if you want your neighborhood to get better, you have to get involved and know who's in charge in your neighborhood or who's in charge in your city in order to make things better.
And keep the promises, right? If you want to make, if you get something on the mail that says, oh, I'm going to make this better and this better and this better, keep that. Because, in 1 year, if you see it's not happening, go knock their door, call them, send them emails, send them letters, and make them accountable for what they promised.
That's a good thing that they're in your city, at least they're in Ohio, so they're kind of closer than the president.
Well, I'll kind of open up the questions that we got from one of our Google forms. So this actually comes out from one of our students here. Her name is Carlia Lopez, and she wants to speak about what about like swing states and the value of Ohio, because it's a swing state. Can you talk about the importance of people getting out to vote more? Even it's like, well, I'm this political party and this political party. Can you just speak on the value of swing states and elections?
Ohio is considered a swing state, and so I don't know if you noticed, but people like in the ads on whenever you're watching or signs across on people's lawns, like people are really campaigning really hard in here because they want to win Ohio over. And so pay attention to that, because the way you vote could influence how the whole election turns out. So that's why it's even more important that Ohio really shows up to vote.
All right, looks like we have a question from Alondra. She wants to know, what advice do you have for first-time voters when they're voting in person or by ballot?
Sure, definitely first time, those are going to vote for the first time. Don't get intimidated because it's different, obviously, it's different. So if you're, voting by mail, then you're gonna get the ballot at home, so you're gonna have more time to review it. If you wanna go in person, which is, if it's your first time, try to go in person. I mean, obviously, if you don't have any concerns with COVID, because it's totally different and everything. So, so that's pretty cool. But just take your time. I know that there's going to be a lot of people waiting, but just take your time, read through, do your research ahead of time. Like Regina mentioned, there are a lot of websites where you can look at the ballot, what kind of questions you're going to be getting, and then so prepare yourself so that you can do that. You are allowed to bring a translator. They cannot deny that right. So you can make that translator can be any age. So if you need somebody to, help you navigate through the voting place, you can bring somebody with you. The other thing is that if you have, the special needs, like, you need accommodations, they should also be able to help you, get to the voting area. If you are, on a wheelchair or with crutches, anything else, you should be able to get help to get to the voting place.
Mm-hmm. And adding on to that, there's no reason that this has to be something you do by yourself. Like, invite your friends, ask them, hey, how are you planning to get to the polls? Or have you requested your absentee ballot yet? Like, I was checking in on my friends the other day, like, hey, did you guys register to vote yet? Did you guys request your absentee ballot? So have that conversation. Let's make it a group thing. Like, hey, we go vote, and then maybe we get some lunch after. Like, make it a social thing so that you hold your friends accountable. There's no reason you have to do it by yourself. And this is something pretty important. So why shouldn't you include others in it too?
So Brianna, going back to how much the media is creating, expectation about the voting day, one good turnout of that is like many companies are now accommodating. Like, for example, the company that I work for is allowing us to take the day off if we want as a vacation day. Like Regina said, to go in group and, you can go have lunch afterwards and things like that. Obviously with all the safety measures. My husband's work is allowing them to take a 3 hours lunch so that they can go cast, the ballot during the lunch break. So that's a benefit right now of having created some commotion. And, back in the day, so I was trying to understand, why do we vote on a Tuesday? So apparently, we don't vote on a Sunday because it's church day, so this comes, back from the very beginning, back into history. So couldn't do it on a Sunday because it's church day, couldn't do it on a Monday because it's right after church day, and some people had to travel to the main cities to be able to vote. And that's why it was decided as a Tuesday, because it wasn't affecting, crops or anywhere that had to happen in the field. It was easier, and that's why it was decided to be on a Tuesday. But in other places it's on a Sunday, so you don't have to work. But again, here we should take advantage that this year employers are being a little bit more flexible and letting their people take longer breaks, longer lunchtime, or even taking a half day or a whole day off to get and exercise your right and your duty to vote.
And for the students, like, I had one professor that was like, we're having a day off, but then there's another that's like, no, we're gonna have class. And so like now all of us are trying to get a petition around to have the request the day off. So don't be afraid to have that conversation with your teachers and say, well, hey, this is something really important. So maybe we can arrange something so that we can still go and vote.
So basically what I'm hearing is that they're saying there's no reason why you can't. Basically, they're giving you every reason to go. So go ahead.
Come on, bring your excuses.
Right. Come on, you're getting a whole day off work. No excuses.
I guess to follow that up, this is actually presented by another student, but they rather stay anonymous. So they kind of asked, what is some of the process that you have to go through to decide the candidate you're going to vote for? Because they were kind of talking about, well, what if both candidates kind of have cons, which I think, that's going to happen. no human is perfect, no political system is perfect. So can you just kind of talk about like some of the education things that you can do, or just overall some type of like ways that you can, I kind of support this candidate, I kind of support this candidate, or some of this the different values that you can kind of look at to know like this is who I'm going to vote for?
I think first of all, you have to look at your, remember your values, right? Sometimes you have to write them down. What is that I believe? What is that I want to see happening in the next in the next 10 years? Because keep in mind, especially presidential candidates and others candidates can be reelected. And so you're not looking at just 4 years, you're looking at 8 years with the consequences potentially being 10 years or more. And so think about what you want to see happening in the next 10 years. Where do you want our country to be? What do you want our people to do? Like, I honestly don't want to ever see again what is happening, or with, the uncertainty that minorities have right now for everything that is happening. Some people are really afraid, especially in some neighborhoods. It's very dangerous. And so I don't want that to ever happen again to any one of us. So when I'm looking at my research, I'm looking about, one of the things that I'm looking for is that candidate exposure to diversity. Because diversity is difficult to get if you have not have experiences in the past, if you're not being exposed to other cultures.
Greetings, Cristo Rey. This is Mr. Wynn, your Director of Student Support. With Halloween just around the corner, I thought I'd share with you a scary fact that keeps me up at night. And that scary fact is that you cannot hear sound in space. That's right. If you were to scream in space, no one would hear you. Fortunately, you're not in space. You're on Earth, here in Columbus, Ohio. And so, if you were to scream, we would most definitely hear you. And hopefully, it's related to joy, because next week, your grades are coming out at the end of the quarter, and hopefully they're great, great, great grades. If they aren't great grades, don't fret. Use this last week to be able to check in with your teachers, turn in any missing homework assignments, turn in any extra credit, so those points can go up and therefore your grades can go up. It's like Mr. Blankson once told me, it's not the grades that make the man, it's the man that makes the grades. Wow, so profound. So, listen to Mr. Blankson and make sure that you're doing everything you can to get your grades up by the end of the quarter. Enjoy the rest of your day.
And I can tell you for experience, when I first got here to Ohio, one of the things that I felt the worst was discrimination. And when I dig through the people that was making me feel unwelcome, it wasn't on purpose. They have never been exposed to somebody that didn't have English as a first language or wasn't from Ohio. So I was like a weirdo to them because, I had an accent and I came from Peru and I had an industrial engineering background. So my brain was left instead of right. And so I know that people have good intentions. It's very hard that you find somebody that wants to do bad on purpose. So, but still, your experiences kind of tell how you're going to react to certain things. So one of the things that I'm looking for is for that candidate exposure to diversity. Do you come from a diverse neighborhood? Do you come from a diverse school? Do you go to a diverse, college or university? What kind of, groups were you related to? Are you going to really understand how to fix the problem that we have in our country? I also look at their, education, because we want to make sure that we have people from different disciplines. That helps, when you're trying to put together a team to solve difficult problems. You want people that don't think alike. You want to have those different perspectives. And I'm also looking for ethnicity and racial representation. So, when you said these two candidates are very similar. So I may just, see on who else is there and maybe favor the candidate that has a different background or ethnicity, just to make sure that there is a balance in power.
I think right now is not the time to just be thinking just for yourself. Don't just think about how this candidate might favor you, but also how they might affect other groups. For example, think about everyone who can't vote. anyone who's under 18, people who have a felony, which are majority people of color, people who are undocumented or immigrants, people who live in territories like Puerto Rico or Guam, but they're still US citizens. All these people can't vote, but they're still very much affected by everything that's going on in America. So think about them, how they're going to be affected, because your vote is going to impact them too. So don't be selfish.
Well, thank you for that. I think that provides a very good perspective about how to kind of like weigh through like different candidates. I know like a lot of times you get caught up in like what the media says or what like, you know, the big picture ideas. You know, I think it's kind of those minute points you talked about. It's the diversity, it's the educational background. It's just their ability to work through problems in a very creative way. Because a lot of what we learn in like AP or AP Gov or like APUSH is that a lot of the issues that we're having now, we've seen them for hundreds of years. So it's about who is there to offer a creative response, who is there to offer a new idea to really fix it. You know, climate change did not start yesterday. Racial injustice did not start yesterday. But who's going to be there to provide this new trend of new thinking? Who's going to be there to provide that new trend of like, hey, we thought about this way in the past. This is how we're going to think about it in the future.
And you also want to look for a good balance between youth and experience, right? Your experienced people know how to work the system, you know, are going to provide that framework and, you know, that ability of moving things forward because they already know how. But then your youth have the energy, the new ideas, the passion that will come well, right? So we also are looking for that mix between, don't discard somebody that has been in power for many years just because they've been in power for many years. Look at what they have done, you know, because they will definitely be the catalyst to the youth that are just getting into government and may not have that experience, you know, that will help, again, create balance.
And that kind of just reminded me of another point is that don't be afraid to like look up like who is funding their campaign. Like one thing that really struck me about AOC is that she has a grassroots campaign, so you know she's not going to be favoring like big like the medicine companies or the big oil companies. Like, you know, she's going to be fighting for the people because she doesn't have to respond to these different companies. So don't be afraid to look up who is all benefiting from these laws that this legislator is doing.
Knowing who's funding that campaign is very important because as much as you want to be, you know, that very truthful and good leader, you have to respond for those that fund your campaign, unfortunately.
Which reminds me, if you have the money and you really like a candidate and they're like similar to AOC in which they have a grassroots campaign, don't be afraid to help them out, you know, donate or make calls for them or knock door to door for them. You know, if you really like a candidate, you can do more.
Help them out because they don't have the big funding as others do.
Wow, really great advice. You got the listeners wanting more. If you see here in the comments, we have one from Ayana. She asked, what are some easy tips I can share with others who are first-time voters?
You know, first-time voters, do your research. That's going to be the most important. It could be confusing because you're not used to these. So you really have to spend some time. And I wonder, Regina, are there any, like, you know, seminars or webinars for first-time voters? Maybe we can pass some information to the group. I think the Women's, you know, League is doing some webinars for first-time voters. So we can pass some information on to those that are interested. Just, you know, marking anything because just you don't even know who is who. That's not a good situation to be in. You know, you have no clue what is in this ballot, and you're not ready.
Mm-hmm. And so definitely check out the Secretary of State's website to check out those deadlines. Make sure you're registered to vote, so that you're all set on election day. And then also the Franklin County Board of Elections to see if there's any updates you want to mention, or check out the hours for early voting as well. So I would definitely keep those two in mind as you make a plan for how you want to vote this election. And make a plan, first of all.
All right, just brimming with knowledge. I love it. We have our very last question from Alondra before we wrap up. She asked, what about early in-person voting? Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, that takes place on the Franklin County Board of Elections in Morse Road. So that's where you go. Obviously, bring your mask and, you know, check the hours because they are different every day. And you can just go. You have to bring an ID, and, you know, they will just let you in. I have done it a few times. where you just walk in and to cast your ballot. Take your time again, don't feel pressure. Nobody is taking how long you're taking, even though the person beside you may be like anxious. They're not really taking time. They're not going to kick you off. There's no bell ringing that you're done and you have to leave. Take your time, and think through what you're doing.
And going off of that, it actually doesn't have to be your ID. If you have like a student ID that has like your name or address, you can take that. If you have like a recent electric bill that has your name and address and it has like the date, and so it's recent, you can bring that in. So there's a lot of different forms of ID, as long as it has like your name and address to verify that you're actually a citizen of Franklin County in Ohio. You should be good to go.
And one other thing that I wanted to touch really quickly is that don't feel obligated to tell people who do you vote for. We used to say voting is private, and especially if you think different than the rest of your family or the rest of your friends, you are certainly have the right to keep your vote private and don't share with anybody. So keep that in mind. And that question from Alondra just reminded me, because one of the things that caught me out is that I had people when I walk out from the Board of Election board, I had people approaching me. I don't know who they were, but they were asking, could you tell us who do you vote for? And I'm like, what? Why are you asking me that? And I think they were like doing like some, polling or, putting some statistics or something to try to get an early read for that. But I'm like, no, my vote is private. I'm not telling you. So don't feel obligated to share any information.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to our guests, the Liza family, for coming out just to speak to not only us as the podcast hosts, but just the entire student body. And I just want to say major thank you to Ms. Aliba, the DI director, Ms. Ragland, Ms. Vallejo, as a part of just the PTA movement and just overall the entire Cristo Rey community. And I just want to say some of the major points that we learned tonight is just do whatever it takes to make your vote matter. Every vote matters. Every representation you see in today's government is because of a vote. So I just want to say major thank you to everyone for coming here today, and to all the people who are unfortunately not able to make it today. You're going to be able to listen to it, so thank you. And just want to say this is going to be the close of today's podcast.
Thank you so much.
This is the podcast, Cristo Rey. I think that I was born to stuff my face with candy corn. This is the podcast, Cristo Rey. And if you're from the future, could you tell me who won election night?
Senators. I'm not going to answer the question because the question is radical left. Will you shut up, man? Listen, who is on your list, Joe? Who's on your list?
Right, gentlemen, I think
this is so unprecedented.
He's going to pack the court. We have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment. That was really productive.